Leadership Preparation Webinar Series. Even in a pandemic, why equity still matters for school leadership, Part 2. The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement is comprised of an executive director reporting to the assistant state superintendent, coordinators for school improvement, academic improvement, and leadership development, as well as leadership specialists. Our office has three main goals: fostering the growth of effective leaders, ensuring valid and reliable evaluations, and raising the quality of education. We provide targeted professional learning experiences and resources to equip current and future leaders with the skills and knowledge required for successful school and district leadership. We oversee the development and implementation of Maryland's teacher and principal evaluation system. Training, guidance, and support is provided to local school systems in the implementation of fair and valid evaluations. Lastly, we provide customized professional learning experiences and support informed by data and grounded in effective practices to improve school performance. To earn continuing professional development credit, in order to receive 1 credit, you must view 5 webinars, including Part 1 and Part 2. Additionally, you will complete 3 hours of experiences per webinar to include pre-work, participant guides with the webinar, and extension activities. In order to receive 2 CPD credits, you must watch all the webinars in the series, including Part 1 and Part 2. Then you will complete 3 hours of experiences per webinar to include any pre-work, participant guides with the webinar, and extension activities. In order to submit your materials, please complete the Google form found in the description below the video. Meet the presenter. For this webinar series, we partnered with Dr. Annette Anderson from the Johns Hopkins University School of Education.
So let's take a moment to talk about the expectations and logistics for today's session. The expectation of our participants is that they will understand the importance for equity to improving student learning outcomes, that they will review and engage with resources that inform an evolving understanding of the role that school leaders play in promoting sound equity practices. And finally, they will contemplate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the attainment of equity aims, and to consider as well how school leaders can mitigate unintended outcomes, even in unforeseen circumstances. To the right of your screen, you will see the participant resources that have been curated for today's session. Take a moment to look through these resources and to become familiar with them, as we will use them throughout the session. Our webinar outcomes for today include the following. Number 1, to examine the evolving role for school leaders of equity in Maryland public schools, to identify potential areas of instructional and cultural disruption to best practices around equity that have been brought on or exacerbated by the pandemic, to determine equitable practices and school improvement for principals in varied approaches to school reopening, to analyze the effectiveness level for professional practice and alignment to the professional standards for educational leaders, or the PSEL standards, and to use the PSEL standards to improve connections to professional practice. Let's take a moment to look at this video from Pedro Noguera, who talks about how schools work to promote equity among students. Dr. Noguera says, in schools that are really focused on equity, they are trying to meet the different needs of kids to focus on outcomes. Take a moment to watch this video so that we can continue our work together on equity.
The link for the video, How do Schools Promote Equity Among Students, is available in the description below this video.
You may recall, if you watched the previous webinar, that the Maryland State Department of Education in 2017 published an equity guide for excellence. And in it, they have named 4 equity focus areas that they see as critical to being able to lift up the work of equity. Those 4 areas include a focus on academic achievement and growth by building a more equitable academic program. Second focus is on leadership and human capital that is concerned with recruiting and retaining effective and diverse educators and staff. The third is a focus on school climate and culture that is really concerned with building a climate that supports student success. And lastly, a focus on educator and staff capacity that considers how to improve learning experiences for every child in every classroom. So why does equity still matter? Well, it matters for the outcomes of children in the state of Maryland. According to the most recent 2020 Kids Count profile for the state of Maryland that has been created by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the number of children across the state who are not in school at ages 3 and 4 has increased from 49% in 2009 to 51% by 2018. And children in Maryland have a lower degree of reading proficiency in 2020 than did their peers in 2009, from 65% to 63%. And then finally, the trend of 8th graders who were not proficient in math has increased from 60% in 2009 to 67% in 2019. What this suggests is that we have more work to do in the state to make sure that equity for students across the age bands and developmental areas, as well as the grade levels, are being served in a way that equity levels them up and allows them to be equally prepared with their peers throughout the state of Maryland. You may find more information about this topic if you click this link.
More information is available from the Maryland Profile Report, which is linked on the description below the video.
As we take a look at this slide, we can see the poverty trends among children in Maryland long before COVID-19 struck. This information from the Kids Count Data Center at the Annie E. Casey Foundation shows that between 2008 and 2015, there was a marked rise in the number of students who were receiving free and reduced meals. In addition, we see that the percentage of students receiving free and reduced meals across the state has increased. And you can take a look at these slides to see where the saturation is greatest among students who are receiving free and reduced meals. This slide gives us further data about where the percentage of students receiving free and reduced meals in Maryland are located. As you can tell from looking through this data, there are 7 counties across the state where the percentage of students who are receiving free and reduced meals in 2018 was above 50% of the student population. Take a look at this chart. So welcome now to the first activity of this webinar. This is an equity data dive. And an equity data dive is critically important because it gives a school leader the information that they need to make decisions to help them to provide greater access and opportunity for equity for all learners. As we've seen from the previous slides, there's a ream of data that's available about our schools and about our students' performance that will help to inform how we can grow equity for all of our students. In this exercise, you're going to take a look at the Maryland School Report Card.
The link for the Maryland School Report Card is available in the list of resources below this video.
So take a look at that. What we'd like for you to do is to get into the data, both for your district and for your school. Pull up the district data as well as the district data for your specific school to locate how student performance is trending, to get familiar with that data so that you can understand in particular how the trends are moving overall, and then specifically for some of the subgroup populations that are a part of your school. So once you have pulled up the website, We want you to review the most recent student achievement data for your district and for your current school, as I just said. How does your school perform relative to your district? Are they doing better than the district? Is your school doing a little bit worse than your district in terms of academic performance? Let's think about that. How is your school and how does your district compare to the data for the state, for the rest of the state of Maryland? Because you have to know where your students are to know where the gaps might be that you are going to now, as a school leader, work to improve. What percentage, for example, of the students were proficient in the latest round of results in math and in English language arts? Be able to disseminate that information by grade or by content area, to be able to look at the population over time, to look for trends in the data. For further insights into how to interpret this data, please refer to pages 4 through 8 of the Maryland Equity Guidebook.
The link for the Maryland Equity Guidebook is available in the list of resources below this video.
You may also find more information about equity as a measure in the Maryland Report Card by using the link that is also here. Once you've had an opportunity to pull up the data, to examine it, to compare it to the district as well as the rest of the state, you're going to do some synthesis, some analysis of this in a 250-word reflection that captures your insights into understanding this current data for your school and district, as well as outlining the challenges that you see in your current district and school in terms of meeting equitable outcomes for all. Be sure to identify how specific subgroups in the data, for example, Asian students, African American students, Latino students, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students that are particularly called out in the data as subgroups are performing, and where you can identify opportunities for academic growth. What do you see as the greatest challenges to leveling up outcomes for moving all of those students forward in terms of their academic performance? And how might the COVID-19 disruption to in-person schooling accelerate these challenges? Think about that and identify that, label that in your reflection as you start to nail down some of the challenges that you can see moving forward. And what equity imperatives do you think need to be reinforced in the face of the pandemic? What do you think in the face of this current environment our students need in order to make progress and academic growth? Along with your reflection, be sure to include a downloaded PDF from the Maryland Report Card website of your school with the most up-to-date report card data attached. School leadership matters when it comes to equity. As we saw previously, around the state, we have seen an increase in the number of schools that serve students with free and reduced meals. However, that does not mean that our students are incapable of achieving high performance outcomes. A 2015 Bain study demonstrates that certain schools are able to achieve exceptional results despite high levels of poverty. How is this possible? Strong leaders who build strong school leadership teams. Take a look at figure number 1, where you can see that some schools achieve exceptional results even with high percentages of low-income students.
The link for the Bain study is available in the description below the video.
So as we just said a moment ago, school leaders matter. But school leaders have to be able to delegate important roles to more people across the organization and in their school building to be successful, particularly if they're going to be able to reach their equity goals. This 2015 Bain study that we just spoke about a moment ago also recognizes that most school principals manage a far heavier number of staff than their other peer managers at a sooner level of their careers, and yet are expected to be adept at coaching, evaluation, and talent management. So it's really important as a school leader that the priorities get set very quickly in order to be successful and to become a high-performing school that is focused on equitable outcomes for all. As you can see here in Figure 4, principals typically manage many more people than do leaders in other fields. It says that in a typical school, principals supervise up to 10 non-instructional staff, pushing the total close to 50 people, while the typical manager of a complex, highly skilled work environment manages around 5 people. So this suggests that in order for a proficient school leader to be able to build the type of team that's going to be able to enact the aims of equity, that there be distributed, delegated leadership skills that can focus on multiple different roles across the school. So as we pointed out a moment ago, the role of school leaders has evolved, and it continues to evolve as we continue to promote the fight for equity in terms of academic outcomes for all students. As we said earlier, the role of school leaders has evolved from that of building leader and instructional leader and family and student liaison and district liaison to one that encompasses much more of a situational and a contextual role that underscores the aims of equity. But as we consider how this role continues to evolve, we also have to think about how the school leader is responsible for both instructional leadership as well as the school climate. And equity is part of both of those conversations, and it's critically important that in order to promote equitable student outcomes, a successful school leader must understand how they can balance their roles, both as an instructional leader as well as the chief of school climate in their buildings. As I said earlier, it's really important for school leaders to understand how to delegate in order to be successful, because principals typically manage many more individuals than a typical manager in a highly complex organization does. Because of that, school leaders need to be focused with laser sharp eyes on improving instructional leadership as well as underscoring the relationship between equity and school climate. In order to make that happen, school leaders need to think about how they can delegate across their staff to the strengths of the leaders in their schools to be able to help them to carry out their aims for equity in both instructional leadership as well as in school climate. So how can school leaders strategically focus their time as an ally of equity to successfully drive meaningful change? So as we've said before, school improvement planning is really important as school leaders think about how they can push for equity. So what are some steps that school leaders might take once they have a handle on the data in their school improvement plan to be able to really rethink their plan for equity? First, they should look at the school improvement data to help them to assess their school's current achievement reality. What data currently exists to inform school performance outcomes relative to equity? Secondly, school leaders should determine the concrete school culture factors that can be positively used to impact school equity efforts. And school leaders should be really intentional about choosing equity champions in the building who can help to promote those school equity efforts. Third, school leaders should identify some factors that will help to elevate improvements to the socio-emotional level of learning conditions in the school climate. That means being able to really isolate what concrete factors can help to move the work around social-emotional learning so that the school climate can improve. Fourth, school leaders should choose key responsibility roles in order to encourage staff buy-in. As we have noted before, that high-performing school leaders build a team. Building a leadership team of people that are both formal leaders as well as informal leaders are really a critical piece of helping to bring in more buy-in to pushing for equity. And then finally, school leaders should curate a list of measurable evidences to measure their success. Now we are ready to begin exercise number 2, equity action items, next steps. For this activity, you will need to locate your school improvement plan for your school, as well as the continuity of learning and recovery plan that was turned in by your district to the Maryland State Department of Education last summer. In this exercise, you are going to scan both of those documents for equity considerations among your school's plans as well as the district's plans and the goals for the year. How does equity fit into these plans? What is explicitly identified? What is missing? And what are the most important items to consider as you identify what equity looks like in a successful school, in a successful district? Next, for this exercise, we are going to ask you to curate a list of the top 3 actionable items overall from both of these documents. Explain what next steps you will need in order to put these 3 action items into work. And so, for all the reasons that we have laid out previously, school leaders must be allies of equity. Why is this true? Well, first, when we focus our attention on opportunities to develop school leaders as allies of equity, we inherently promote strategic, equitable outcomes for every student. Another reason is because principals must understand how to look beyond their own identity formation to lead for the village through an equity lens. And then, as we think about how we measure the impact of the work of the school leader, the principal evaluation becomes key to understanding how to measure impact for school leaders as allies of equity. A 2018 evaluation from the Johns Hopkins University Institute for Education Policy suggests that there are 3 key areas of convergence in principal evaluation. First, we must measure equity through the lens of instructional leadership practices, coaching, evaluation, and defining the educational program. Next, we must consider how effective a school leader is with regards to organizational management, systems leadership, if you will. And third, we must think about community leadership and outreach. How is the school leader promoting the success of all students? So that measurement piece is key to understanding the impact of a school leader. But the real question is this enough? Do we have enough information based on how our current principal evaluations are structured to be able to help us to gather enough information to measure impact? We think that we do. Given the likelihood that a school leader will need to deal with the pressing issues of the day as it concerns his or her school population, addressing equity in a school will not happen by happenstance. School leaders must understand the data. They must be reflective of the data. They must interact with the data. They must know the data, and they must see the data and how it plays out in the school setting in order to be able to actively plan to embed equity as a recurring theme of their ongoing instructional leadership strategy in order to be successful. Now we will complete our final equity activity for this webinar series. This is our school climate analysis. And as we've said, school leaders have an instructional leadership role, and they also have a role around school climate and culture. As they start to think about how to improve outcomes for all students, school climate is equally important to instruction. In order to complete this activity, you will need to visit the Maryland report card at the link in your slide. Open the View District Data tab located for your district page on the website and click on the tab entitled Civil Rights Data Collection that's located on the far right side of the webpage. Open the tab for School Quality, Climate, and Safety that will open the spreadsheet with district-wide data on chronic absenteeism, suspensions and expulsions, incidents of violence, harassment, and bullying, and arrests and referrals. Find your current school on this spreadsheet. Create a simple table in Word or Excel to demonstrate your school level data in these various areas as listed above. The questions that we'd like for you to consider as a part of this activity are: what is the percentage of the student body has been chronically absent? How many suspensions and or expulsions have occurred in this Office of Civil Rights latest data? Also, how has the school experienced any incidents of violence? Have there been incidents of harassment or bullying that have been reported in this Office of Civil Rights data? Have there been arrests or law enforcement referrals? If there have been, note them. And how does this data fall out along subgroup categories? Has the pandemic potentially impacted efforts to build a strong school climate to support equity efforts in your current school setting? Think about that and look at what is happening based on the data that you have, as well as the data that you know from your experience in the building. Finally, create a report of your findings in a 250-word reflection. Be sure to submit both the reflection as well as your table when you are done with this activity. Thank you.
The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement would like to thank you for participating in the Leadership Preparation virtual webinar series. We hope you found this particular webinar informative and beneficial to your work as you prepare as a leader. To access the webinar series and find additional resources, please visit the Maryland Resource Hub. The Maryland Resource Hub can be located at marylandresourcehub.com. That is MarylandResourcehub.com. We appreciate your feedback and would ask that you take a moment at this time to complete the SurveyMonkey link or use the QR code. The feedback that you provide to us will inform our work in the office as we develop additional resources to support you in the field. Again, thank you very much for your time in completing the feedback. As a reminder, the continuing professional development credits are available to you for this leadership preparation webinar series. To receive 1 credit, you will need to view 5 webinars, parts 1 and 2, and complete 3 hours of experience for the webinar. That would include the pre-work, viewing the webinar, and completing the participant's guide, as well as extension activities related to the webinar. To receive 2 CPD credits, you will watch all 10 webinars, parts 1 and 2, and complete 3 hours of experience per webinar. Again, it would include the pre-work, viewing the webinar and completing the participant's guide while watching, and extension activities related to the webinar. After you have completed the work, you will then submit all of the materials to the Google Form link listed. If you need to contact us with any questions for any reason at the Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement, you can contact Ed Mitzel, Executive Director, at edmund.mitzel@maryland.gov. That is edmund.mitzel@maryland.gov, or Dr. Lori Ellis, Coordinator for Leadership Development, at lori.ellis@maryland.gov. That is lori.ellis@maryland.gov.